Alright, so for our first deck profile here on Mid-Tier Gaming, we have Angel Garcia, who got first place at our Story Championship Qualifiers with Hatchiyack. So, you want to show off your pricing or anything? You want to show anything else off?
No, I guess I can show.
Alright, so any shout outs you want to do right now?
Shout out to my boys Zach, Melvin. They're the real homies. Jose may be fake though, but he the homie for letting me win. Besides that, you know, I gotta thank them the most because they like literally helped me with this deck from the very beginning, and if it wasn't for them, I probably wouldn't have won this.
Alright, so let's get into the deck. Alright, show us what you're running, D.
So first things, of course, the leader, Hatchiyack. His effect is honestly like the best part about him. If besides his effect, he's not that good of a card, honestly. His effect, of course, is that anything under 8 can't attack more than once with battle cards, and so that just means that at maximum, I'm getting attacked maybe 4 times if they have like dual attack. But besides that, it helps me play more defensive. And of course, his flip side does 20k damage when he attacks instead of 15, so it allows me to put a bit more pressure than regular. But of course, I got my super combos. I'm using Temporal Rescue Trunks, mainly because of their Sparking 5 effect, because with Hatch, usually you're not going to drop below 5 in less than, say, 3-4 turns. So usually having the Sparking 5 is so much more effective than having if life is 4 or less than.
Did you ever consider running Bibbidi over Trunks?
Originally I did run Bibbidi over Trunks, but then after his errata, as well as the way my original deck played, he was just not useful. I needed more card pulls, and instead I was just getting more combo power, which wasn't necessary.
Alright.
And then of course I have my 1-drops. I have Supreme Kai of Time, Time Regulator. I mainly just use her turn 1 for a blocker, and then if I need to, I'll bring her back using Power Bursts. But she's just a good simple blocker. Sometimes she'll get popped, but it doesn't really matter because it's a 1 cost, so it's not too much of a problem if I lose her.
So you got 2 of her?
And I also run 2 Supreme Kai times Time Disruptors, and these are more for counterplay whenever an opponent starts using 1-drops that like say do critical or double strike. Turn 1, usually I don't have that much defensive options against 2 attacks, so she's usually the best to make sure that I only take 1 hit at most.
Yeah, and he literally posted in.
After that, I have my counterplays, Rebellion Hammer, and the reason I use Rebellion Hammer is mainly just because it's one of the only ones that removes the card before it gets played, so any effects are like negated. There's not really anything else good for black except for maybe Super Hammer Maha, but you need to be at 4 life or less. And with Hatch, that's already a problem. So I run 3 of these just in case, and more likely than not, I'll play for 2 instead of 1. But on the rare occasions that I do have 12 in Warp, I'll usually play them for 1.
Alright.
And then of course I have Majin Buu Human Extinction Attack. These are usually my 1-ofs whenever I don't have my counters on hand. And usually they're very effective because they act very similar to 3 5Ks or even 1 10k and a 5k, and it's only 1 card and it costs 1 energy, so it's much more effective than say using a 10k with 1 energy. As well, it can also help me remove any cards from drop area from my opponent's drop area to warp, and usually there's cards like Ribrianne that can affect me, or even Master Roshi, and so I usually use those to just remove them before they can deal any damage to me.
Alrighty.
Next I got my my Power Bursts, and I use these they're of course a counter, and it allows me to get a 1-drop and just pull it back up onto up into my hand. And so usually I use that in combination with a Xeno Goku that I have that I'll show later. But these are really effective in either getting Supreme Kais back or even getting a Supreme Kai. Anything that can just help me out later on. Especially since if I do have a counter that I accidentally may have milled out, I can still bring it back using a Power Burst. Next, I run only 1 Petrification. I used to run 2 or 3 of these, but now I only run 1 because 1 is honestly much more effective. And since it's only battle cards, with the new meta with Unisons, this isn't really too effective. But it's good for any cards that my opponent may have that can do double strike or critical or anything that can damage me for more than 1 health. So it's really effective for that. And it's an okay card, so I only run 1 of it. And then I have my Instant Transmission Hamamehas. The main reason I use them is just for recycling. As a deck that needs to be really defensive until turn 5, turn 6, having as much blockers or counters is really useful. So having these wasting 2 from hand to put them into drop and then bringing this back is way more effective than say using a power burst and then getting a 1-drop that might not even be useful. So I use these usually whenever I don't want to waste a power burst or a petrification. Then I got more 1-drops. I have a Dark Power Mass Saiyan. Of course, the effect is if it's a 15k or less and it's being played it's played using a non-keyword skill, your opponent has to drop 2. And so usually that's more effective for me on earlier games because there's some opponents that will like play multiple cards using an auto, and it can just be really effective for me to avoid any swarming that may happen early on. Then I have 4 Son Goku making an entrance. These were the Xeno Gokus I was talking about with Power Burst, and it's basically just a counter, pay 1 and then play a card. And these can sometimes get countered by some specific cards, but most of the time they aren't getting countered. And because I can use them effectively, I can always recycle them with Power Burst. So instead of having, say, 8 counters at most, I can have up to 12 with Power Burst. And it also allows me to evolve them into other cards that I may use, either for utility or for killing. And then I run 2 Son Goku Saiyan Transcendence. These aren't really used for attacking, it's more for getting cards from Warp back into drop because since I use quite a bit of Overwhelm, it's more effective into getting another Overwhelm for the next turn. The only problem with this, I can only play them turn 4 and afterwards, so they're not too effective, but they can be effective for any long games where I may need to bring cards back. Then I run 2 Super Saiyan 4 Son Gokus, Conquerors of Evil. These are usually killers more than anything else because it costs 5 energy to play them. So if I play them at turn 5 or turn 6, I'm risking taking multiple damage in one turn. But usually with its triple attack and double strike as well as removing 1 card from field, it allows me to just deal a lot of damage without having to worry too much about losing the match because it can take up to 6 life if I played my cards right. And it also has a secondary effect which allows me to drop a card to counter, and that's also useful when I have, say, 6 energy. So I can use Power Burst, take a life, and then play, say, another Son Goku making an entrance because Power Burst can take from Warp. And since this is a Xeno Evolve, the Goku already goes to Warp. And then afterwards, if necessary, I can just remove a card from hand and then play Son Goku, even the card that I might have gotten from life. Afterwards, I have my Overwhelm cards. So I run 2 Super Saiyan 3 Vegetas, Unstoppable Evolutions. The reason I play these is mainly just to remove 1 card from like my opponent's battlefield. Usually, say with like the burn effect, there's cards like the Super Saiyan Gogeta that can burn me for 1 life, and so usually I can play these turn 2, turn 3 when they come out, and then try to remove them as fast as possible, as well as also dealing 25k to my opponent if necessary. It also lets me draw cards, so it's also good for just keep maintaining hand, which can be problematic here and there. So it's just an overall useful card. Next, I have my Super Saiyan 4 Bardock Combat Instincts, and this is just more for hand control more than anything else. He costs 3 instead of 2, so I don't use him until much later. But if I need to get an effective attack in, I usually use him more than anyone else because he can remove up to 2 cards if I'm correct. Yeah, 2 cards from the opponent's hand, and if possible, it can remove counters or anything that may stop an attack. So it's very useful for just trying to deal damage as well as also playing it more defensively. And then of course I have the main attraction, the main, the thing that Hatch is basically built on. I have these 4 Hatchiyacks fueled by hatred. And honestly, this is just a good card overall. I've been running them since the very beginning. And they're just so effective in doing what they need to do. Before, I had previously thought of removing them, but with the new evolution they became so much more effective. But basically, even if I can't get the evolution out, it's still a dual attack card, which can destroy a card from field with ignoring barrier, as well as also being a card that can defend once again by sending it to the drop. So it's just an overall effective card that I still keep on running. And then of course I have EX evolutions, and then it is these 3 Hatchiyacks, Mad with Hate. And these cards are extremely effective because since it's an EX evolve, I don't have to pay any energy, and since I have the Hatchiyacks on the field, it automatically becomes an 8-drop, thus allowing me to bypass the Hatchiyack effect while also allowing me to deal an additional 3 attacks. And it also has an added bonus of just allowing me to avoid any counters, or if my opponent gets countered, it gives me more hand control. So overall, in one turn, I can deal up to, say, 5 attacks. And for a card like Hatchiyack, which only allows up to like 3 cards to attack, it's extremely effective. So it's beneficial to use at all time, whenever possible. Next, I have my Unisons. I run only one Super Saiyan 4 Vegeta. And the main reason for this is that originally I thought he'd be a good card, but now realizing it, it's very hard to get him onto field without him dying because of his 5k power. And his +2 relies on me using Overwhelm, and many times throughout the game I'm not able to Overwhelm, thus allowing my opponent to just easily take him out at the cost of just 1 attack. But I mainly just use him in case I get a very Overwhelm heavy turn or Overwhelm heavy hand. And then I usually just play him and then start building him up so I can use him -5 to just deal 1 directed damage. It's not too effective, but at times it can be very useful. Next, I have my 3 Super Saiyan 4 Gohans. And these are the ones I use much more often because of their activate main. Since it's an up 2 effect, I can still get the +1 without having to worry too much about building him up before he gets destroyed. He also gains... at -3, he also gains, I think, 15k, and it allows me to bring 2 cards between 20 and 30 and send them back to my hand. So it can be useful to bring back, say, a Super Saiyan 4 Goku, or even one of the Overwhelm cards, or in some cases, Hatchiyack that I might need to pull off the killing blow. So he's just a really good card overall, and he also gets a another counter whenever I use an Overwhelm, so it's just an added bonus. Next, I have I have 2 Mechikabras. I mainly use Mechikabra just for stopping an opponent, but most of the time I'll only use it in games where I know the player I'm dealing with, or know which cards they might play. And it's usually safe against to use against secret rares because, of course, when you get hit with the secret rare, it's usually not going to be an easy thing to handle. So having a Mechikabra at least delays it for 1 turn, and for Hatch, 1 turn may be all he needs to get the finishing blow. Afterwards, I also have these 3 Dr. Lychees blockers. I don't really play them. I never hard cast them because wasting 3 energy for a blocker that's only 10k is not very effective. But what I'll usually do is use them for combo power, and then after I use them for combo power, I'll pay the 2 energy cost, bring him out, and then of course his blocker effects allows me to mill 2, which is also very useful for any Overwhelm cards or my secret rare, which you'll see later. Overall, he's just a good effective blocker, and even though he costs 2 energy, he can tank some attacks if necessary. Next, I got my Lord Slugs Ghost Warriors. And now these I use over any other Ghost Warrior because of his effect, where I get to basically destroy this card and then send one of my opponent's card to warp. That is equal to or more than the energy of my opponent. And it's really good for a lot of decks such as like Broly, where he can get out a 6-drop or higher in less than 1 or 2 turns. So it's just very effective because, to me, not only do I get to recycle some cards back into deck, I also am allowed to just take out an opponent free of cost unless they have barrier. That's the only time when this won't really be effective, but most of the time it will. Next, I run 1 Trunks, and the reason I use this Trunks is under the rare case where everything is going wrong, or I just need 1 more piece to just get everything to start working again. I'll use this Trunks to bring back 1 card from my drop. And though I do have other cards that can do it, such as a Super Saiyan Son Gohan, he's more effective in just trying to get that 1 card right away, such as a secret rare, which usually can't be brought back. Next, I also run a 5-drop Hatchiyack Hatred Everlasting. I usually use 1 of him because, to be honest, he's not too effective. He's a 3-cost, and all he does is he's basically a single strike, no critical, no double strike. But I can use him to attack an opponent's cards and then bring battle cards, and then of course stand him back out to send another attack. So he's overall not too ineffective, but he's just a 1-of because he's not too necessary to have. Finally, I have of course, my game killers. Besides, Hatch and then the Conqueror of Evil, I run these just to make sure that I can finish off an opponent safely and effectively. So the first thing I have is, of course, a Food Dark Banisher. And the reason I run him is for more early games when I am at a lower health much faster, say turn 5, turn 4, turn 5, and I can't get out the other Fu. He's mainly effective in just allowing my opponent to just start dropping hand if necessary. And if he's combined with, say, a Hatchiyack or even a Super Saiyan 4 Goku, he can cause a lot of problems for the opponent trying to defend. So he's just a very good aggressive card overall. And I only run one of them because I don't feel it's necessary to run more than one. The next card I run, of course, is a Fu Shrouded Mystery. And the reason I use this Fu more often than the other one is mainly because of his effect that just negates all skills besides leader skills. Most of the times, leaders aren't too effective in defending. So just having this allows me to stop any negates, stop any counters or anything similar to any of the sort. And it just helps me overall, like, just finish the game. It's a really good card, and I just really love using it when necessary. And then finally, I have my Secret Rare, and I use Black Smoke Dragon. Originally, I had used Demigra, just because it ripped 4 cards and then allowed me to combo with them. But I decided to use just Black Smoke Dragon because of he's more effective overall. Because of his 3 different effects, I can either choose to have hand control, deck control, or even just destroy a swarm of boards, such as cards like Bulma, the leaders. It allows me to just rip all blockers from her field without having to worry about them, without having to worry about me needing to attack her blockers first, especially those who may have a revenge. So that's my deck list.
All right, I got 2 questions for you before we wrap up and talk about your matchups. So I noticed you're not running the 4-drop hatch. Is there a reason for that?
Running a 4-drop hatch, it sometimes can be effective, but to me, it's just there's no value in it. Usually, turn 4, I'd be able to play him, but playing him 1 turn earlier is not as effective when I can just hard cast him. When I use a 4-drop, it usually just means I have to remove some cards which may be more effective, and it also is much more easier to remove than this card. Usually when I have a chain that I need to get to, it makes it so much easier to remove a card, especially with all these newer cards coming out. So just removing that part altogether and allowing this for 5 instead is so much more effective.
And then I noticed you're not running Protector of the People. Is there a reason for that, or did you just not have the card?
Protector of the People, though originally I wanted to run him, or to run the counter, it's not too effective for me because, as I said, at most, usually opponents can get up to 3 hits, including Unison. And it's just, it wouldn't help me out too much getting that power. I don't see any use for it in this deck specifically because I'm going to defend so much more than what I need to with that.
Okay, and then do you want to talk about any of your matchups? What was MVP of your deck in each matchup, whatnot?
I would definitely say out of all the cards that were most effective, it has to be the Super Saiyan 4 Son Goku. Because I was getting quite lucky with my matchups, I was able to get the Power Burst and the Super Saiyan Goku making an entrance combo, or the Son Goku making an entrance combo multiple times. And usually when I had him in hand, it usually meant turn 5, turn 6, when I'd have an extra energy just to be safe, I'd play him out and then just use it to kill the opponent. And then in one specific match, I was able to keep him on field and use his secondary effect to just keep me alive for 1 more turn.
Okay. You want to talk about which matches you played against or what decks?
The decks I played against today were Visalia, which was a big hassle because though Visalia does have a lot of cards and he can only swing a few times, it just meant that I was getting damaged a lot more than I needed to. And usually turn 4, turn 5, I'd be stuck at 3 or 4 health, which is something I do not want to be at, especially during those turns. I managed to get out of victory because I was managing my cards, especially my counters, very efficiently. And I was able to make it so that my opponent still had cards on field so that he would avoid being able to play that the 7-drop Visalia, if I'm correct, 6 or 7-drop Visalia that plays when they have no cards in field. Besides that, it was just a matter of me using the Son Goku and then just using cards to stop the opponent in his tracks. Another matchup I had was between... another matchup I had was against Bernhan. And that matchup was way more difficult for me because even though I had the defensive power, it still meant that my opponent was able to just use Alliance to try to damage me. But luckily, match 1, I was able to just secure that Super Saiyan 4 or Super Saiyan Gogeta wasn't allowed on field. And then I was able to just kill, of course, with the Super Saiyan 4 Son Goku. Turn match 1, I won with the Hatchiyack Mad with Hate because of his 5 individual swings. Turn 2, or match 2, I guess, I managed to get a Super Saiyan 4 Son Goku on field, and that was the same round where, even though it didn't kill, I was able to use his final negate to stop one more attack that would have killed me. And then afterwards, I played a Fu to just make sure that my opponent wouldn't be able to use cards, especially since he only had 2 in hand. And I was able to get the victory during that round. And I think my final match was Reboot Gohan, and I think that was probably the fastest match out of all of them because Hatch is a very slow deck, and I went to time once, and I was really close to going to time. I think my second match. Luckily, with Gohan, I was just able to keep my counters just in play at all times, and I managed to get something very lucky where when I was created for 3 health, I managed to get a Son Gohan or Son Goku making an entrance on to drop, thus allowing me to use a power burst into Son Goku, and since he had already stood up, it allowed me to get the victory. Second round, I was just very good at managing when I should have taken a hit and when I shouldn't have. And because of that, I was able to secure the victory.
All right, then. Anything else you want to say before we end the video?
I'm surprised Hatch won. It definitely felt like it was against me, and there was many times where I felt that I was going to lose. But I think it was just due to luck as well as playing my cards right that allowed me to actually win.
Alrighty. Well, you guys heard it here first. Hatch got first at an event. Whew, been a while since I see this leader. And yeah, no, that's it. We will be having a second place deck profile later today, or later after this video. Yeah, see you guys.